He's a tour guide extraordinaire, and he's a star of the upcoming film Summertime. So bring him on up, Rob Hollander.
This is a Lower East Side Christmas story. When the Lower East Side included the East Village, everything from 14th Street down was the Lower East Side. And some of you remember when this was. Well, I moved down to the Lower East Side to get out of the mainstream. This was in the 1970s. And so I could live in a place where, you know, it was cheap enough. Believe it or not, East Village was really cheap, and you didn't have to have a real job to live there, and it was very truly and sincerely out of the mainstream. 11th Street between B and C, half of the buildings were either demolished or abandoned. The neighborhood was full of junkies, and there was one building on the corner of 11th and B, this big tenement building, and everyone who lived there was a junkie. And just down the block, opposite my building, there was another building, very conveniently, full of nothing but drug dealers. My building had all these sort of marginal characters, and when I'd meet them, they'd try to impress me by saying, you know, oh, I'm a poet, I'm a painter, you know, and I'd get to know them, and then, you know, in an intimate moment, they would confess to me how alone they were, because they were living there not like me because I wanted to be there. They were living there because mainstream society would not receive them. They'd say this to me about being alone as if being alone were the worst fate that could possibly befall a living sentient being. And it kind of troubled me, because I'd made this choice. I'd gone there to be alone. And I thought, you know, if this is something you only confess to people at this intimate moment, I've made a big mistake, maybe. Well, Christmas rolled around in the neighborhood that year. And, you know, Christmas is this gregarious season where people who feel alone feel most lonely and often most desperate. But luckily for them, Christmas had no effect on 11th Street. You know, you got to remember, this was the poorest neighborhood. Nobody had money. And so you couldn't spend money on, you know, Christmas lights. The only people who had money were the drug dealers, and they were not about to deck their illicit operation with the weapon stash in the tunnel, you know, with Christmas lights to bring cheer to the junkies, right? Because that was not the cheer that they were interested in. But I did experience Christmas that year, because I would go to the Strand often, which is on Broadway. And Broadway, of course, is a very busy commercial thoroughfare. And I'd see this wonderful picture of Christmas. It was very unique, because this is in the days before shopping online. You had to shop on foot. So you would see people on Broadway downtown that you never saw any other time of the year. In particular, you'd see the Upper East Side matrons in their designer coats, very angular and unique, and bright scarves, and carrying like a dozen shopping bags that would like bunch around them like some 19th century hoop skirt. And even more rare, but common at Christmas time, you'd see their husbands, these very distinguished gentlemen. They always wore like a long, dark coat, buttoned to the chin, and like hanging all the way down to their ankles. And these folks were like, they were shopping, so they were rushing back and forth. And I knew them. I knew who they were, because I came from their world. But they no longer knew me. And they didn't recognize me. They didn't acknowledge me. I walked among them as if I were unseen, unheard. And this was like my ultimate dream, because I went to this neighborhood to get out of the mainstream, and here I could walk among them, and they didn't see me. I felt like, you know, the ghost of Christmas present. But, you know, not the Bacchus that Dickens describes, but the Lower East Side version of the Ghost of Christmas Present, dressed in rags and totally isolated and alone. And Christmas that year for me was like this crazy picture that because I was not involved in it, I could look at it as if I were in a museum. And it was like a dark background, a black background, on which there were these bright shapes that were running in all different directions. I don't know, you ever seen like a Kandinsky painting? You know, like some crazy Russian painting, that's what it looked like. And at the same time, I was carrying with me my moody inner world, because I was like, oh, alone, right? And my inner world, which was very lonely, was more like a composition in gray. Imagine a seascape with an overcast sky and a brackish, welling ocean and a cold wind howling through it. And this was what my inner experience was like, and I carried it with me. And Christmas that year was like the best Christmas. And for many years, I experienced this Christmas until finally one year I got a job. Listen, it was inevitable, you know. Well, in this job, I was lucky. I had the most wonderful boss. She was so smart, and she just encouraged you to do your best work, and if everything wasn't perfect, that was okay, because she wasn't stupid. She didn't think everything had to be perfect. She was just happy that you were, you know, and you were proud of the work you were doing. It was just wonderful. And when Christmas came that year, I wanted to buy her a present. Well, when you buy presents for somebody you really care about, it can't be just any present. It has to be the perfect present. Now, I'm sure you've all confronted this problem of the perfect present, right? It has, by my count, 3 characteristics. Number 1, it has to be something the person really, really wants, either because she really, really likes it or really, really needs it. 2, it has to be something she doesn't already have. Now, right away, you see the problem, right? There's something you really, really like and really, really need. The chances are that you really, really, really don't have it are this big. And if that weren't bad enough, the other charming characteristic of the perfect present is it has to be unique, which means you can't find it anywhere, right? This is like, I think, a test of intelligence. You can take this test yourself. Ask yourself, are you looking for the perfect present for anyone? If you are, sorry to say, you're an imbecile. That does not exist. And myself, being an imbecile, it's a little harsh. Being a moron, I went looking for the perfect present. Then, of course, I don't need to tell you, needless to say, I didn't find it. And I had to settle for a whole number of imperfect presents. But I thought, you know, I didn't get her the perfect present. At least I'll get her the perfect card. Because I really am an imbecile. Maybe I was just young. I'm going to spare you the story of the search for the perfect card, because I think I want to keep this short. Suffice it to say, 2 weeks later, I am at the Metropolitan Museum in the card shop with the perfect card in my hand. The Metropolitan Museum is on the Upper East Side, which is where those matrons and their husbands live. And when I'm on the Upper East Side in Christmas, there's something that I always have to do. I walk, not to Park Avenue, which is like bereft of human presence. It's like the weirdest place in the world, because there's all these, it's lined with huge residential buildings. There is not a human being in sight.